God will use circumstances in your life to break you, to bring you to that point of absolute brokenness and calling out upon him with dependence, or it's a choice that we can make. Unfortunately for me, I had avoided it for too long, like many people maybe who are listening today, and God used circumstances in my life to break me. And it was a series of events over a season of life that things I had built my hopes upon, he began to take away. People I had depended upon for happiness and satisfaction and contentment, much more than him, he began to take away.
Welcome to this week's Pastors Forum. Hi, I'm Byron Tyler. Glad to have you along as we get together with an area pastor, talk about their heartbeat for ministry, a little bit about their background, how they got to where they are today, the journey that God has carried them through and in. Sometimes there have been some challenging circumstances along the way, and a few bumps to get there, and continue bumps in the ministry, of course, as we learn from various pastors in the Mid-South area. Excited about introducing this week's pastor. We've been trying to get together now for a while and get our schedules together, and now it's come to fruition. We've got Barrett Bowden. Barrett is the pastor of Island Community Church. Some folks are saying, wow, is there an island nearby? There's a mud island. Barrett, welcome.
Thanks. So glad to be here.
Island Community Church. I love islands because I lived on one for 3 years in the island of Guam.
Nice.
I love island life. You know, island life is so different than stateside life or landlocked life.
It's true.
It's laid back. Nobody wears a tie. Of course, I have a tie on right now as we're recording our show. And the time is more generous. People are more laid back. That must reflect a culture that Island Community has, I'm assuming.
We are a more laid-back church. You could say that for sure. The Mud Island community is unique in Memphis, and it's a wonderful community. Not many people think of Mud Island as a residential community. A lot of people are familiar with the amusement park that's down there on the river, but there's actually about 7,000 people that live on the island, and it does have a real distinct flair.
As a child, I remember Mud Island being nothing but a distant little land speck out there in the Mississippi. I say distant because, of course, when you're only 4 or 5 years old, everything looks big. But I remember there was an airport out there.
Yeah.
Before they did some major dredging on the Mississippi River, Mud Island was often underwater. That's why they called it Mud Island.
Right.
And sometimes all you would see, there was the airport little flag, and sometimes all you would see is the flag waving, the building, and everything else was underwater.
Yeah. Thankfully, it's not underwater today.
Thankful for that. Yeah, there's some great development down there.
It's amazing.
Harbor Bridge, I guess, takes you over to the island.
It does. And the community is flourishing. Truly, not just the island community. I think we've maxed out all the available space now for development on the Mud Island proper, but just the downtown community in general is undergoing such a season of redevelopment and restoration. It's just an exciting time to be downtown.
Well, there's some great little eating places there. I like hanging out down there, and I have made my way down there numerous times, or even just to throw the Frisbee on the riverbank. You know?
Absolutely. And when you come down next time, remember us, because it's a community that really needs prayer.
So exactly where is Island Community Church located in reference to the island itself?
We started back in 2003, actually, in a home on Mud Island. The vision and the burden was for that community proper because it's a very planned community, but there was no church included in those plans, and the community desperately needs a strong gospel church. So we started in a home. We outgrew the home and moved to the little school that's in Harbortown. You might have seen it if you've been down there to Paulette's or one of the restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little school there in Harbortown, and we met there for many years until we outgrew that space. And then we moved off the island for the first time, which was hard for us because there's something strategic about being in that geographical community, but there's just not space for us. So we moved off to a hotel ballroom, and now we're in a facility about a mile off of the island, right at the corner of Parkway and Danny Thomas there across from St. Jude.
And you said 2002, 2003 is when the church started?
Right.
Now, were you one of the original organizers of the work?
I was not. Hoyt Lovelace, actually, who is here working on his PhD, and his wife is in medical school in the downtown area at UT, HSC. He's the one that had the vision and did the work of planting the church.
So how did you come about being the pastor? And tell me about your journey.
Yeah, so we've been here about 8 years. And funny enough, my story is a lot like Hoyt, who started the church. My wife was accepted into medical school at University of Tennessee Health Science Center, which is downtown. And that's so much of the residential community is people who are associated with medical institutions in that area. So we moved in originally to be a part of the community, for her to be in school. And the Lord had already called me to ministry. I had begun to move toward that and actually ended up transferring here to Mid-America Baptist Theological to finish my Master's of Divinity. And I began to be involved, my wife and I both, just as members of the church, because we were so desirous to be a part of a community in that area. And eventually that led into some volunteer leadership and then the associate pastor role, and then eventually into lead pastor role. So,
have you seen a growing connection between the church and scientific community in the area, other doctors and medical type people connecting with the church?
Absolutely. It's a huge part of our body and our vision for what outreach looks like. It comes with some amazing opportunities and some challenges. The desires and needs, the inquiry of those types of people are quite different than some of the other areas of the city, different graphic. But we do have a heart to reach them, and we are seeing so many come to Christ and so many involved in ministry. And we have some real strategic outreaches on those campuses and in the hospitals even to really help people understand what it looks like to be a strong person of faith, follower of Jesus, but also to live in those communities. They have an incredible platform just with their skill sets, not only to affect our Memphis area, but also to take the gospel to some of the hardest places in the world. They have an open opportunity. And so we really are wanting to see them understand what faith looks like in the workplace.
Barrett, that's really a strategic vision purpose. I really respect that and appreciate that. I think sometimes you see that wall or that separation between the two when it comes to science and faith. Luke was a physician. He was a follower of Christ, and he wrote one of the Gospels.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, he wrote the book of Acts, too.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
What makes the fellowship of Island Community, what makes it unique, you think?
Well, we're in an area of the city that a lot of people had kind of written off in a lot of ways, and it is a unique urban environment. We have, like you say, and we just discussed, we have a lot of intellectual people. We have a lot of millennials. We have a lot of people who have kind of written off the church and kind of distanced themselves from what they think of as the traditional type church. And we have really found a way to flourish in that environment. It has not always been easy. Like you talked about in your opening segment, sometimes it has had challenges, and it has been slow growth, much more slow than maybe some other church starts that you're familiar with, but it's been genuine growth. And our growth has come from people genuinely coming into relationship with Jesus and genuinely learning to follow him with their lives and genuinely loving the work of ministry that God calls us to. And so we are a very eclectic type community. We are a younger church. We have a lot of internationals in our church. Many nations are represented in our church, a diverse community. And we are much more relational than programmatic. We are really authentic in our relationship with God and with one another. It's really a beautiful thing to see how God has grown his church in our downtown community.
Your faith journey, where and how did that begin?
Well, I actually was raised as a pastor's kid. And
a PK.
A PK.
The terrible PK.
The terrible and wonderful blessing of being a PK. Yeah. And so, as you can imagine, I grew up very familiar with the gospel and with church life. But like many PKs, I have a similar story in that it was very much kind of just the routine of my life, a religion, and not so much an authentic relationship with Jesus until really I was almost ready to leave the house and went through some crises in my journey. But then really in college, it was even more of a season that the Lord broke me of myself and of my sin and of my pride and selfish ambitions and really brought me to a place of full surrender and relationship with him. And it was through that process of brokenness and renewal, God's renewal in me, that the vision for my life, the outlook and trajectory for my life really began to change. And I'd started to do what I said I would never do, which was to become more involved and think about being more involved in the work of ministry vocationally. And it really wasn't so much what I had planned to do as much as I couldn't escape the call of God and the anointing of God on my life. I knew that he was leading me and purposing me for making much of him with all of my life.
Was it a surprise to your dad?
It was. You know, your parents always see things potential in you that you don't see in yourself. And I think probably like many dads, they want their sons to follow in their footsteps. He was a wonderful model and shepherd for me, shepherd for our church. And I've learned from him so much, even now as in my time as pastor. I think they were surprised but delighted. I'm thankful for their continued influence.
Barrett, you said something I think we all, as humans, struggle with: sin, self, and pride.
Yeah.
And usually we try to journey life finding how we can survive through living in pride and sin and self. We fill ourselves with all kinds of things and buy all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But you used a key word there, and that was brokenness.
Yeah.
I mean, what broke you? I mean, how did you, because a lot of people aren't broken over these three areas of life: sin, pride, and self.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's going to happen one of two ways. Either your circumstances, God will use circumstances in your life to break you, to bring you to that point of absolute brokenness and calling out upon Him with dependence, or it's a choice that we can make. Unfortunately for me, I had avoided it for too long, like many people maybe who are listening today, and God used circumstances in my life to break me. And it was a series of events over a season of life that things I had built my hopes upon, He began to take away. People I had depended upon for happiness and satisfaction and contentment, much more than Him, He began to take away. And it was a series of events like that where literally I was just brought to my knees. And the Lord will do that sometimes, and it's hard going through it. You sometimes will cry out to God and be frustrated with Him, but it's really gracious of the Lord to allow us those moments where we come to our senses, like we read about the son in Luke 15, where you kind of look up and you're like, why am I wallowing in this?
Yeah.
And you remember home, and you make your way back, and He's waiting for you with loving, outstretched arms. That's very much my journey, and I'm thankful for that.
I'm so thankful for that too, and the fact that He would receive us in that place. But oftentimes we have to bottom out. I mean, we do have to bottom out.
Yeah.
I mean, self is always trying to prove itself. There's self again.
Yep.
And it's a dead-end road. It's not going to go anywhere. And yet when we surrender and recognize His lordship and His sovereign ways over all of our life, you know, the affairs of our life and who He is, He talked about carrying the burden and letting us put His yoke on, which was easier. And we try to, you know, carry something we can't even manage, you know?
Well, it's absolutely true. And that's exactly where God wants us, is to recognize that we can't do it on our own at all. The one we so desperately need is Him. The sooner we come to that realization, the better. But I'm so thankful that God continues to pursue us until we do come back to Him. And that's very much the story of my life, just God's grace. I don't know where I would be if the Lord had not pursued me in His grace. But we do still have a choice to respond to Him in surrender and in faith, and just allowing Him to change us from the inside out. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so thankful that we continue to see that around our city today, that the Lord continues in His great love to bring redemption to people's lives through brokenness.
That's a good word. I'll tell you what, we're going to have to say goodbye on this show and pick it up next time, continue the conversation. Before we say goodbye, I'd like for you to give us some details about Island Community Church and how we can find when the services are, and maybe events or things like that people can connect with.
Sure. Well, you can go to our website, islandcommunitychurch.com or iccmemphis.com, and find out a lot more about our vision and the ministries. We meet Sundays as a community, a large group of gathering. Our worship time is Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock a.m. It's 721 North Parkway, downtown, real close to St. Jude, if you're familiar with that area. And we would love to have you and your family and your friends anytime. We would absolutely invite you in. There's so many opportunities to get involved, and we thank you.
Anything you would want a first-time visitor to experience when they walk in the doors?
Just love. The loving embrace of God through His people. We find so many times in our church that people come into our church who have kind of written off church before. And we find that a lot of times people belong before they believe. And it's that sense of belonging, that sense of community, that sense of just open embrace that really moves them closer into relationship with the Lord. And so I just hope that you know that you're welcome no matter where you've come from, what you've been through, what you believe, that you're welcome. And we would love to journey with you.
Friends, that's all the time we have on today's program. Thanks for listening. I'm Byron Tyler. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
It is a particular area of our passion in reaching millennials. If you look at statistics, the church, the evangelical church, is losing, and it's a hard demographic to reach. About I think it's like 60% of millennials say that church attendance is just not important at all. Just increasingly, we're seeing that this generation is just totally unengaged with church and with relationship with the Lord. And we're seeing that many millennials who are growing up in church are also not staying in the church after they leave their parents' home.
Hey, we're back for another week of Pastors Forum. Glad to have you along. I'm Byron Tyler. Last time we got together with Barrett Bowden, pastor of the Island Community Church. Hey, the surf is up. Barrett, welcome back.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
I don't know if there's any real surfing going on Mississippi River.
That's too dangerous.
Yeah, way too dangerous. I've seen people water ski. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. I've seen these big logs floating down the river. I don't know anybody would want to water ski in the Mississippi.
I don't know why either. You probably end up in Tunica, so you better be careful.
You better be very careful. Glad to have you back, and I was excited to learn about this community of believers down on Mud Island, or Harbor Town. Is that the appropriate way to say it now?
Yeah, I mean, Harbor Town is the initial community that was planted there on the island, and the island has grown beyond that now, but it's great.
Last time we were talking about you came to Memphis to go to seminary, but also I think your wife was in medical school.
Right.
Did you come to go to seminary, or did you come for her to go to medical school?
Well, I had started seminary. We moved here originally for her to be in medical school, so I transferred in once we came here for her schooling.
And where did you transfer from?
New Orleans Theological is where I had started, but the campus in Atlanta, that was started there. Well, it grew. It had already begun, but it grew a lot during the Katrina evacuation. It became their primary hub, and that's where I had started my schooling.
So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Macon, Georgia.
Macon, Georgia.
Yeah.
I can smell the paper pulp now, all those paper mills.
Oh, yeah, a lot of paper mills.
Oh, my goodness. That's some of the strongest smell you'll find anywhere in America, I
It's
think.
funny that you know that. It is absolutely true, but it's a great community and about an hour south of Atlanta. I love it.
Some of the finest people in America live in Georgia.
Well, thank you.
I know that because I lived in Waynesboro, Georgia for about 3 months back when I was in college. I worked with an organization called Operation Mobilization.
Right.
And there in Waynesboro was a book warehouse where they would supply the materials for the doulos and the logos.
Right.
And so I volunteered about 3 or 4 months there. Then I went overseas and spent some time in Austria. It's interesting. Got a chance to meet some great Georgia folks.
I tell you, Georgians are great people. I love my home state, but I love Tennessee too.
It gets incredibly hot down there in the summertime.
It does.
I mean, even more so than here.
It really does, and especially if you go even further south than Macon. I mean, it is just hot and humid, but it's great for watermelon. You know, it makes you savor that sweet watermelon even more. So.
Oh, my. And those peaches, too. Georgia
the peaches are unbelievable.
Yeah.
There's a little truck that comes to Memphis from Georgia about once a week in the summertime when it's, ripe season.
Yeah.
And we always get our peaches from the Georgia peach truck.
Now, where's
Memphis.
this truck located at?
He travels around. I think he's got a website, so you can find him.
So look for the Georgia peach guy.
Exactly. Yeah. Nothing beats a good Georgia peach.
It's like it. I can think about peach cobbler, peach pies, and oh my goodness.
We even make peach muffins. So
peach muffins?
Yeah, why not?
I haven't had that yet.
Why not?
Okay. Tell me your wife's name.
Michelle.
Where and how did you meet Michelle?
So we met actually in Charleston, and we worked together at a summer camp that was actually put on by Lifeway Christian Resources. They run student camps called Fuge Camps, and we worked a mission Fuge camp in Charleston, South Carolina together one summer. They had a no dating rule, but I was extremely attracted and interested in her, and our friendship grew over the next several years, and eventually we began to realize there was more to it, began to date, and eventually marry.
I think you said something there that's really key, Barrett. When you look at relationships, a lot of guys and girls are looking for relationships. They want to have that special lifelong relationship. But something you said there about doing ministry together.
Absolutely.
You can really learn a lot about somebody when you do ministry together.
Absolutely. And I think it's probably, for followers of Jesus, is one of the best places to meet potential or future life mate, spouse, is doing the work of ministry together, just getting involved, finding people who have the same heart, same interest, same passion, same involvement as you do, looking around and seeing who's there with you. And you realize, hey, God's brought somebody that I could see myself spending the rest of my life with.
And plus, too, when you prioritize Jesus, because when you do ministry, putting the focus on Christ, that is paramount in a relationship today, because talk about rocky roads of life and things you go through. The stableness of any relationship is Jesus.
Absolutely. I always encourage couples to make sure that is at the leading edge of what they're thinking about and what they're involved in together as they even begin the courtship and dating processes. Often if you get in premarital counseling with folks and you realize they don't know each other's hearts, they've never prayed together, they've never really talked about deeper spiritual things, a lot of times that's a cause for concern. It's not that you can't overcome that, it's just, it's so important to prioritize Jesus first, even in the early stages.
Yeah. Your wife, Michelle, she was going through medical school. You were in seminary. That can put a lot of stress on a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And if you hit finals at the same time.
Absolutely. And if anybody's ever been through either of those, especially medical school, I never realized how much we should really thank our doctors for what they went through until I walked alongside my wife through the whole process. It is really intense. And the residency, I basically just said goodbye to her for about 3 years and said, see you 3 years from now. We had our first child, our only child, in the middle of all of that. So it was a stressful period, but His grace is sufficient. And he was faithful to see us through. He gives you enough strength for each day. You know, my mom used to tell me that. I never really understood what she meant because I don't think I'd ever really had to depend on it just for daily strength. But in this last season, I've learned that more than ever before.
You mentioned last week, big focus of the outreach of Island Community Church is millennials.
Yeah.
We talk about this generation of millennials. What are some of the needs? What are some of the heartaches? What are some of the ministry opportunities when we look at this people group, millennials?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up because it is a particular area of our passion in reaching millennials. If you look at statistics, the church, the evangelical church, is losing, and it's a hard demographic to reach. I think it's like 60% of millennials say that church attendance is just not important at all. Just increasingly, we're seeing that this generation is just totally unengaged with church and with relationship with the Lord. And we're seeing that many millennials who are growing up in church are also not staying in the church after they leave their parents' home. So what we have done is really try to rethink what it looks like to be strategic and effective with millennials. One of the things is really just helping them realize what an authentic relationship with Jesus looks like. Some of my background too, I knew growing up a relationship with the church, but I didn't really know a relationship with Jesus. And there's a big difference. Bringing people back to the real heart of the gospel, not just here's our mission statement, but really helping people see that we're sincere in our walk with Jesus and that this is a real person that we really need to pursue and to explore a real relationship with him. A real focus too on mission is really important with millennials. I think increasingly statistics show that millennials are disgusted by, if you look at budgets, and most of the budgets going to these big fancy buildings or just big overheads, and there's not much focus on the poor, the hurting, the oppressed, not much focus really on mission, the real things that matter in life, the things that will last. It's a real need for us as a group of churches here in our city and around our country to help showcase the gospel by being very involved on mission together. And we as a church have been extremely focused in that 25% of our budget goes to ministry and mission outside of our church. That has been incredibly attractive to millennials in our community. We are extremely involved in serving the local community. Almost every night of the week, our building is open to different ministries and different outreaches. We're extremely involved internationally as well. We've got about 7 or 8 trips a year, short-term trips to overseas places, strategic partners. We are supporting missionaries on 5 continents. Again, large share of our financial resources are going that way. And I think that's important among millennials for them to see that this is not just something that we talk about, but this is something that we live. Also being willing to walk alongside of them, that we're not a Sunday-only church. In fact, Sunday is really not the primary strength of our ministry. Yep. We're a relational church. And so we live together in community, and we walk together in authentic ways as we follow Jesus together. They really love mentoring, and not so much being preached at, but being mentored, being shepherded in really relational ways. And so those are just some of the things that we're trying to do. But what we're seeing is our church is growing in a demographic that many churches are struggling in. And so we're realizing that some of this real strategic focus and kind of programmatic strategy changes even is working. Yeah. It's finding fruit in this group.
As you were describing millennials, you were painting this picture for me, and I was just thinking of the tremendous opportunity for the church. Maybe could possibly one of the greatest generations for the church age could be this age right now.
I believe it absolutely is. It is absolutely our greatest opportunity and need because it's the future. It's the future of our country. But it's going to require us as a body, the collective church, and to really rethink what we're doing and how we're doing it. I think that's really where the challenge is going to come. And I've been encouraged in the conversations I've been having with other church leaders and even among our associational, denominational leadership. Increasingly, I think people are becoming more aware that change is needed if we're to continue to reach a new generations of people for Christ.
You also were talking about reaching internationals and that your church is made up of a body that welcomes internationals.
Yeah.
That topic can be a sore button for a lot. We talk about people from other nations coming here.
Absolutely.
Talk about the opportunity for the church to invest in and invite and be, really to be the arm of Christ to people who many have left desperate places, left everything behind.
Absolutely.
For what they're hoping to be a bright future in the United States.
Absolutely. It's really the heartbeat of God and the scriptures. Let the peoples praise you, O God, Psalm 6:7. Let all the peoples praise you, let the nations sing and shout for joy. And we've got to recognize as a church here in America that global missions is something that, yes, we need to leave our country and do, but a lot of times we fail to see that the nations are here. They're next door. They're our neighbors. They're our coworkers. They're in our community. They're within a short drive, even if you don't know anybody in your immediate community. And we've got, as a church, as gospel people, to embrace the people that God has brought into our back door. And we're just seeing tremendous opportunity in the downtown community. We have a lot of people who are that representative of nations that we would spend thousands of dollars to try to get to and reach and to plant missionaries, and they're here and they're open. Many internationals never get invited into an American's home, and we want to be the people who extend that invitation as the followers of Jesus, to invite them in, who show Christ's love and hospitality and welcome. We invest in them through programs like English as a second language. We try to meet practical needs. And in doing so, you build a relationship. Those relationships build trust. That trust builds opportunity to share not only about America, about life, but to share ultimately the most important thing in our life, Jesus Christ. And we're seeing internationals come to Christ. And then the amazing thing is God can use their relationship with Christ to spread the gospel among their people. And so we're seeing that happen, the nations being reached as we embrace them here in our back door.
I had a chance to hear or actually meet U.S. Senator David Langford from Oklahoma. He was talking about connecting with people different than us, whether they be from other nations or right here in our community, we're born here. It needs to begin where we put our feet under the same table.
Yeah.
And he was referring to the dinner table. Time Magazine did a story on this. You just mentioned yourself that we don't invite people different than us into our homes. And so we have an opportunity here again to get under the same table, have a meal together, hear each other's stories, and begin to see how we can plug in gospel into those conversations.
Absolutely. We've got to be willing to do it. Just yesterday, I was teaching Hebrews 13. And if we're serious and we really believe the Bible and we're serious about obeying Jesus, we recognize that that's what he tells us to do, to show hospitality, even to, and especially to the stranger. And for us, I think a lot of times the reason they feel like strangers is because we don't take the time to get to know them as people. And when we begin to invest in those people, hear their stories, really grow a relationship and become friends, authentic friends. We don't treat them as projects, but genuinely we seek to be their friends. They recognize love, the love of God through us, and it leads to opportunity for us to open our mouths and share. It's really amazing.
Barrett Bowden, thank you so much, my dear brother. Thank you for what you're doing for Christ's kingdom, you and Michelle together in the body at Island Community Church in our city. Also want to say a special thanks to Vernon Jones, who is on our staff. He's our evening operator here on the control board. And he's a member of your church, and he's the one who worked to help connect us together.
Yes, we love you, Vernon.
He said, you got to get my pastor on the program. And so we've been trying to do this. Thanks to Candace, who has helped to orchestrate this event today. Thank you, Barrett, again, for these past 2 weeks. We're going to have to say goodbye. If folks want more information about Island Community Church, what's that website? It's islandcommunitychurch.com or iccmemphis.com. Thanks again, Byron. Appreciate it. Friends, that's all the time we have on today's program. Thanks for listening. I'm Byron Tyler. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.